Midshore Riverkeepers here in Easton, Maryland, with Tim Junkin, the founder and advisor to the Midshore Riverkeepers, and Matt Pluto.
That's right.
Not Pluto, Pluto, who is the riverkeeper for the Chop Tank River. Hi, you guys.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
You have your friends with us.
This is Gus.
We do. This is Rogue.
Gus, how old are you?
How old are you, Gus? 9 weeks?
9
He's
weeks
our newest riverkeeper.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
Riverkeeper in training.
Yes. And Rogue, how old is Rogue?
Rogue's about 3 years old.
Okay, well, they'll chime in if need be, right?
Yep.
Of course.
Okay.
I think they will.
So we're here to talk about the state of the rivers here on the Eastern Shore, and particularly about the rivers that you all take care of. Matt, do you want to tell us the rivers that the Midshore Riverkeepers takes care of?
Sure, yeah. So we look after the Chop Tank, the Miles, and the Wye River, as well as Eastern Bay. And we sample the water quality of these rivers on a monthly basis, and we've been doing so consistently for the past 5 years, or consecutively for the past 5 years. And so every year we put together a report card with the results of our water quality data that we've had from the years past.
What kind of water quality are you seeing out there?
Well, we're seeing a similar picture that we saw in the overall Chesapeake Bay. So last year, the report card for the overall bay showed a slight improvement, and we're also seeing that in the lower parts of our river, such as Eastern Bay and the lower part of the Chop Tank River. Once you get farther upriver into the upper parts of the river, like the town of Denton and the town of Greensboro on the Chop Tank, we start to see a different picture where pollution is continuing to increase and the water quality is getting worse.
And why do you think that pollution is increasing?
In that part of the river, the water quality is impacted a lot by what goes on the land. And so when we have a lot of application of fertilizers or different nutrients or runoff from our urban towns, we end up seeing that in our rivers after rain events. And so when you're up in the upper part of the river, we have more narrow waterways that collect a lot of these nutrients and pollution, nutrients of concern. And then when you get down to the lower part of the river, we tend to see more flushing with the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay, and so we tend to see that water quality resemble what we see in the Chesapeake Bay.
So if we did a little bit of science here for a minute, because I'm thinking about that flushing thing. So it's almost natural that if you have a more constricted area, you're going to see more pollution because you don't have that flush quality, the flush action taking place. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And then but then when all these waters come down into the Chesapeake Bay, that Chesapeake Bay is like the big bowl that can handle all this, hopefully, all of these nutrient runoffs and sediment runoffs as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. And when you think about the upper part of our rivers, we have a lot of non-tidal areas, a lot of creeks and streams that flow into the upper part of the river, and so we have a lot more inputs. And so as you talk about the lower parts of the river being more like the bowl, where a lot of mixing goes on, we don't tend to get that mixing that we do in the lower part as in the upper part of the river.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear that the Chesapeake Bay has not handled the amount of pollution that we've been dumping into it for the last 30, 40, 50 years, and we have had huge dead zones and significant, profound depletions of underwater grasses, and the oysters, have been decimated. We've seen, I think, terrific and exciting, hopeful improvements over the last 3 or 4 years in our rivers, and I think in the bay in some of these areas. But let's not kid ourselves and think just because the bay has flushing that it can handle an unlimited amount of pollution that is dumped into it by humans, because it can't.
The more humans, the more pollution. Is that about right?
That's pretty, yeah, that makes sense. Self-evident, yes.
Yeah. Self-evident truth.
Yeah, and it comes from the land, as Matt was saying, and we have a lot of agricultural fertilizer pollution and urban pollution, and we're trying to deal with those. And the great work that Matt and others here at other similar places have been doing over the last decade, I think, is starting to show results. We've had grasses coming back for the last couple of years. We've got clearer water than we've seen in decades. There's been a lot of good signs, and we're hopeful that all this work can continue and that we can continue to see improvements.
Well, I'd like to step back for a minute. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Matt. But Tim, I've had the opportunity to go on a bus tour with you all back in the fall, the work that you're doing with ditches, the roadside ditches to manage water there. Could you talk about that for a minute, please?
Yeah, well, Matt's involved. We have a number of our staff are involved in doing pollution reduction projects on the land. One of those is to try to use roadside ditches, which could be a great source of filtering water. And we have, all over Delmarva, we have roadside ditches that we've built and constructed, as well as ditches that go across farms to drain the fields. And if these could be planted with natural plants that slow down the flow of the water in them and take up the nutrients that are in the water, they can make a huge difference. And it's a fairly simple way to begin to filter the waters coming off the land. And we're doing a number of projects, sort of pioneer projects to demonstrate how inexpensive that would be and how effective it would be.
Because the Eastern Shore is so flat, it is important to picture how you manage water in such a flat area. And if you can slow that water down with the plants in the ditches, you're creating like little rivers, little waterways unto themselves that are clean and have that biology necessary to then take those nutrients that have come out of the soil and washed into these waterways and clean them up with the plants.
Like little mini wetlands would be, I think, an apt description of what we're after.
Yeah.
Slowing the water down and having plants to take up the nutrients in the water.
Yeah, it's not nirvana, but it's about as beautifying the
Yep.
our road system.
Right.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yep.
That would be awesome.
And we're doing that in some cross farm ditches as well. We've done a number of projects in Talbot County and part of our restoration efforts.
Okay, so Matt, tell us about your going out on a boat and what you do on a regular basis to test the water.
Right, so we monitor the water quality on a monthly basis. We have over 50 sites throughout the Choptank River that we visit monthly, and we collect nutrient samples at about a third of those sites and get those processed at the laboratory at Horn Point, and that gives us an idea of where hot spots are, where these nutrients are concentrating, where we might start to see some dead zones and some algae blooms in the event that the nutrients tend to get above the limit that we're concerned about. We also test different parameters such as the salinity levels. That's really important for the oysters on when they're going to spawn. We test for temperature, which is also a driving force in have the algae growing and reproducing and creating these dead zones. And then we also test for oxygen and salinity, as I mentioned, and temperature. And so we do a whole suite of tests that we have at all the sites that we sample.
Well, explain to me, please, if you're doing this testing, is the government doing this testing as well?
That's a great question. Actually, over the past couple of years, we've realized that we have one of the largest data sets on the Choptank River, and so we think there is really a big gap in the amount of testing that the local government and the state government is doing. And so while we're providing a service by collecting this data and sharing it with our partners, we also hope that they're going to get in line with it and start to increase their monitoring as well.
But I mean, this kind of points back to the whole business about how much funding is being given on a state level and then a local level from the federal government, because if in fact you don't have that funding coming down in those sources, then it becomes more apparent that your job is increasingly important. Because if the fishermen want to know, well, can I go out and fish the rivers, the Choptank, or can I fish on the Chesapeake Bay? And the state has to say, well, today, no, you can't, because we've got a ban on rockfish. your skill sets are saying to them, well, the quality of the water is such, or whatever. Can you address that for a second, please?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, well, when we think about the funding, the potential loss of funding, it's a huge concern because you're right, the results that we collect, we produce this report card, which ends up being an incredible outreach tool to let the public know what the state of our rivers are. And so without that information, we're not able to advise people to get in the water after a big rain event because of all the bacteria and the pollutants that are washing off our land into the waters.
Really?
And so it is very important that we continue to collect and monitor this data.
And we're not even talking about the ocean. We're talking about rivers. So can you imagine what's happening in the ocean? Because nobody even is able to do the ocean yet, right?
Well, there's a lot of people who are working on the ocean, but we've made tremendous progress in partnerships with the federal government, federal agencies, state governments, with Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Department of the Environment, and working in partnership to bring innovative pollution reduction projects to our counties and to the region, and working with organizations like the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and others. And we see that we've making real progress. We're actually seeing significant material changes that are multi-year changes for the good in our bay. The idea that the federal government's going to take away that funding at this really critical point is ludicrous. It's short-range thinking. The Bay is an economic engine. Its health, supports our entire state. It supports all of these counties.
And people are coming to Maryland because they realize how wonderful it is.
Yeah, and we got clean water. We've had the last couple of years clear water. Matt goes out and tests every week, but we've seen 8 feet, 10 feet of water clarity.
Awesome.
We have grass beds that are 100 square acres or more in several parts of our rivers, which didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right.
And the funding is essential to this, and it brings jobs, it brings recreation.
And you're just talking about the status quo. You're not saying, hey, bump up our funding. You're just saying keep it.
Well, we should be bumping up our funding. We certainly shouldn't be taking it down, taking it back. And it's so important. I can't imagine. It's so short-sighted, and it shows such a lack of vision to think that we can sacrifice our environment to create a few temporary jobs. In fact, by doing more of the kind of work we're doing, we're creating more jobs. And by having a healthier bay, healthier rivers, we're attracting people here to do innovative things and again, create, robust economies. And so we're grateful that we have state legislators and people in Congress who are going to fight any reduction in the funding for the Chesapeake cleanup effort, and we're hopeful that they'll prevail.
Matt, is there a closing something that you would like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize a point that Tim made earlier. We are starting to see these improvements in our waterways, but that's just the start of it. We need this funding to continue to improve our water quality. By no means are we there yet. We're starting to see some really good signs, but there's still a lot of work to be done and a long way to go.
Well, you all do a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you say, Gus?
Okay.
Say
Gus is going to steal the show.